You've been lied to, not by enemies, but by the very ideals you cherish. You've been told virtue triumphs, that fairness prevails, that the good always win. A comforting fiction, isn't it? But what if the path to true power, to undeniable influence, demands you shed these comforting myths? What if the most profound control isn't built on love, but on a colder, more enduring foundation? The world you inhabit is not a playground for the pure of heart. It is a battleground. And you, my friend, are either a player or a pawn. Which will you choose? This is the stark truth, unvarnished and unapologetic, that history's most pragmatic mind, Niccolo Machiavelli, laid bare centuries ago. And his timeless wisdom, often misunderstood, is precisely the playbook required to navigate and dominate today's complex, ruthless landscape. For too long, the popular narrative surrounding power has been one of saccharine idealism. We are taught to aspire to a leadership built on unwavering ethics, radical transparency, collaborative consensus, and the tireless pursuit of universal goodwill. We idolize the charismatic figure who leads with their heart on their sleeve, who trusts implicitly, who believes in the inherent goodness of humanity. This approach, while noble in its intent, is tragically naive in its execution. It paints a picture of a world where integrity alone is enough to conquer, where genuine intentions are always rewarded, and where enemies can be reasoned with through open dialogue and mutual respect. This vision, while comforting, is a delusion that has crippled countless aspirants to power, rendering them vulnerable, predictable, and ultimately ineffective. They become victims of their own morality, bound by an invisible chain of shoulds in a world that operates on is. Consider the modern boardroom, where a leader insists on transparency to a rival firm, only to find their innovations swiftly copied and their market share eroded. Observe the political arena, where a candidate adheres rigidly to their ethical manifesto, refusing to engage in strategic deception, only to be outmaneuvered by a more ruthless opponent who understands the art of appearances. Watch the career professional, diligently working with integrity, openly sharing their ideas, only to see a more cunning colleague take credit, leveraging relationships and subtle manipulation to ascend the corporate ladder. These individuals, operating under the guise of an ideal, are not just disadvantaged, they are disarmed. Their perceived virtues become their fatal flaws. Their belief in an ideal world blinds them to the sharp edges of the one they actually inhabit. They fail to understand that in the grand theater of human affairs, integrity is often a luxury, and unwavering goodness a perilous vulnerability. The idealist, clutching their moral compass, navigates a stormy sea with a fragile paper map, hoping the currents will be kind. They assume that if they are good, others will be good in return. They believe that sincerity will disarm hostility, that fairness will deter treachery, and that love will conquer all. But history, both ancient and modern, teaches a different lesson. It teaches that men are, as Machiavelli observed, ungrateful, fickle, liars, and deceivers. They are driven by self-interest, fear, and the pursuit of gain. To ignore this fundamental truth is not merely a philosophical oversight, it is a catastrophic strategic blunder. The idealist, in their quest to be loved by all, often ends up being respected by none, and ultimately dominated by those who grasp the grimmer realities of power. They become the sacrificial lamb on the altar of their own unwavering, yet ultimately impotent moral code. It is precisely against this backdrop of pervasive idealism and its predictable failures that the philosophy of Niccolo Machiavelli emerges, not as a philosophy of evil, but as a stark, pragmatic guide to effective governance and undeniable influence. Machiavelli did not teach men how to be wicked, he taught them how to survive and thrive in a wicked world. His genius lay in his unflinching gaze at humanity as it is, not as it should be. How we live, he wrote, is so far removed from how we ought to live that he who abandons what is done for what ought to be done will rather learn his ruin than his preservation. This single sentence encapsulates the chasm between the idealist's dream and the modern prince's imperative. For Machiavelli, the path to power, to dominion over the state, be it a nation, a corporation, an industry, or even one's own sphere of influence, lies not in the cultivation of conventional virtues, but in the strategic mastery of both virtue and vice. The modern prince, armed with Machiavelli's 21 rules of power, understands that these are not moral judgments, but instruments in a sophisticated game. The foundational principle is simple, yet profoundly unsettling. It is necessary for a prince, if he wants to maintain himself, to learn how not to be good, and to use this according to the necessity of the case. This is not a license for wanton cruelty, but an acknowledgement that absolute adherence to goodness, in a world where others do not share such constraints, is a recipe for disaster. The 21 rules of power derived from Machiavelli's insights are a playbook for navigating the treacherous currents of human ambition and self-interest. They teach us that true power is not about being universally loved, but about commanding respect and, when necessary, fear. It is about understanding the psychology of the masses and the motivations of individuals and leveraging these insights to achieve your objectives. These rules demand a cold, objective analysis of every situation, stripping away emotional biases and moral preconceptions. They require a leader to ask not, "What is the right thing to do?" but "What is the effective thing to do to secure and maintain my position?" This fundamental shift in perspective is the awakening of the modern prince, the first step away from the idealist's inevitable ruin and towards a future of strategic dominance. The core of Machiavelli's teaching, and thus of these 21 rules, is that the wise leader observes the nature of man in its rawest form. He knows that men are driven by fear of punishment more than by love, for love is a bond that, being base, they break when it suits them. But fear of punishment never fails. He understands that appearances often matter more than reality, and that a carefully cultivated image can be a more potent weapon than 1,000 honest deeds. This profound insight into human psychology is the initial weapon, the primary tool in the modern prince's arsenal. It is the ability to see the world not as a benevolent playground, but as a chessboard where every piece, every player, is fundamentally motivated by self-preservation and self-advancement. To deny this reality is to invite defeat. To embrace it is to unlock the secrets of true, enduring power. This is not a philosophy for the faint of heart, nor for those who cling to comfortable illusions. It is a philosophy for those who seek to understand the levers of influence, the architecture of control, and the immutable laws that govern human ambition. If you are prepared to shed the shackles of idealism and confront the stark realities of power, if you are ready to wield the wisdom of centuries to forge your own path to domination in today's world, then you must first acknowledge this truth, that the pursuit of power is not a moral journey but a strategic one. For love is a bond of obligation which men, being base, break when it suits them, but fear is maintained by a dread of punishment which never fails. Comment the Black Book of Power to show you are ready for Machiavelli's darker lessons, and subscribe to unravel the next rules of his modern masterpiece. Having dismissed the idealist's folly, we now turn our gaze to the bedrock principles that construct true dominion. The 21 rules of power are not abstract concepts for quiet contemplation. They are a working blueprint for securing and maintaining control in any sphere. They distill the essence of Machiavelli's observations into actionable strategies, forging the modern prince from the malleable clay of ambition and resolve. Let us delve into 3 foundational tenets, each a crucial pillar supporting the edifice of lasting influence. The first and perhaps most misunderstood duality is virtù and fortuna. In the common tongue, virtue speaks of moral uprightness. But for Machiavelli, virtù signifies something far more potent: a leader's prowess, skill, courage, audacity, and strategic brilliance. It is the inherent capacity to act decisively, to adapt swiftly, to wield one's abilities with an unwavering focus on objective results. Virtù is the inner fire, the relentless drive to impose one's will upon the world. Fortuna, on the other hand, represents the unpredictable currents of chance, circumstance, external events, or sheer luck. It is the river of history, flowing onward, indifferent to individual desires. The common man is a leaf upon this river, tossed by its whims. The true prince, however, does not merely drift. He masters the art of navigation. A leader imbued with virtù does not merely react to the tides of fortuna. They anticipate, they prepare, and when the moment arrives, they seize the rudder with a ferocious grip, steering their vessel through the fiercest storms. They recognize that while they cannot control the river itself, they can control their response to it, utilizing every eddy and current to their advantage. Consider the astute entrepreneur who, observing a burgeoning technological shift, a manifestation of fortuna, dedicates immense virtue to researching, developing, and deploying a revolutionary product before competitors even comprehend the paradigm change. Their skill and foresight transform a potential disruption into an unparalleled opportunity for market dominance. Or picture the political strategist who, sensing a widespread public discontent, another facet of fortuna, crafts a compelling narrative, mobilizes resources, and executes a flawless campaign, all acts of virtue, to channel that sentiment into a decisive electoral victory. Virtue is the engine that transforms the raw materials of fortuna into the finished product of power. It is the unwavering spirit that confronts chaos not with despair, but with cunning and a will to overcome. To abdicate this mastery, to merely hope for good fortune, is to guarantee that the unpredictable river will eventually sweep you away. The first rule, therefore, is to cultivate an indomitable virtue that can wrestle fortuna into submission, molding fate to serve your strategic ends. The second indispensable concept, forming a cornerstone of effective leadership, is the art of the lion and the fox. Machiavelli famously asserted that a prince must learn to imitate both the lion and the fox. The lion is mighty, capable of driving off the wolves, symbolizing sheer power, overwhelming force, and the ability to intimidate. The fox, however, is cunning, capable of recognizing snares and traps, representing astuteness, deception, and the ability to outwit adversaries through subtlety. A leader who is only a lion risks falling into cleverly laid traps. One who is only a fox risks being unable to defend themselves against overt aggression. True dominion demands the seamless integration of both archetypes. The modern environment is rife with wolves, aggressive competitors, envious rivals, and those who seek to undermine your authority. To project the lion's strength is to deter them. This manifests as an unyielding public stance, a reputation for swift and decisive retaliation against threats, or the sheer magnitude of one's resources. Think of a dominant corporation leveraging its financial might to acquire a smaller, innovative rival before it can grow into a threat, thereby removing a potential wolf with a display of overwhelming economic force. This is the lion's roar. Simultaneously, the modern leader must embody the fox. They must possess the shrewdness to perceive hidden agendas, to discern the true motives lurking behind diplomatic smiles or corporate alliances. They must be adept at strategic ambiguity, at concealing their true intentions, and at laying their own subtle traps for those who underestimate their intellect. Imagine a nation's intelligence agency operating with fox-like cunning, uncovering a sophisticated cyber-attack plot before it can materialize, thereby averting a national crisis that brute force alone could not prevent. This is the fox's stealth. The effective prince understands that sometimes a direct confrontation is necessary, but often the most dangerous threats are those cloaked in deceit, requiring an equally artful counter-deception. The 21st century leader must master this dual nature, knowing precisely when to bare their teeth and when to disappear into the shadows, observing and manipulating from unseen vantage points. It is the ultimate display of tactical versatility, a core rule for any who aspire to truly dominate. Finally, we arrive at the chilling, yet profoundly rational principle of the economy of well-used cruelty. This rule is perhaps the most misconstrued, frequently equated with wanton tyranny. However, Machiavelli was precise. He distinguished between cruelties well used and those ill used. Well used cruelties, he argued, are those executed swiftly, decisively, and all at once, applied out of absolute necessity to secure power, suppress rebellion, or establish stability. Their objective is to prevent greater, prolonged chaos or suffering. They are surgical, painful, but ultimately brief, designed to remove obstacles and solidify the leader's position with minimal long-term resentment. Ill-used cruelties, conversely, are those that are prolonged, gradual, or repeated, leading to an escalation of hatred and perpetual instability. They breed contempt and incite continuous opposition, ultimately eroding the very power they seek to secure. In a contemporary context, cruelty must be understood metaphorically as the execution of harsh, unpopular, but strategically vital decisions. Consider a chief executive facing impending bankruptcy. A well-used cruelty might involve a swift, large-scale layoff that is painful in the short term, but indispensable for the organization's long-term survival and future prosperity. This decisive action, though difficult, is executed once, explained as a necessary evil, and followed by a clear path forward. This contrasts sharply with ill-used cruelty, where a leader implements piecemeal layoffs over months or years, creating constant anxiety, destroying morale, and ensuring a slow, agonizing decline. Similarly, a political leader might impose unpopular but essential austerity measures, a form of well-used cruelty, immediately upon taking office, weathering the initial public outcry to stabilize the national economy, rather than delaying and prolonging the pain with incremental, ineffectual cuts. The true modern prince understands that sentimentality is a luxury that can dismantle an entire enterprise. The leader must possess the fortitude to make the hard choice, to inflict the necessary short-term pain, not out of malice, but from a calculated understanding that such actions, when applied with precision and purpose, are paramount to the preservation and growth of their dominion. The goal is not to revel in suffering, but to quickly establish an unassailable order, ensuring that any injury is absorbed rapidly, allowing the benefits of stability to be savored more fully thereafter. These fundamental rules, the cultivation of virtue to master fortuna, the strategic duality of the lion and the fox, and the calculated application of well-used severity, are the bedrock upon which genuine influence is built. They are not pathways to popularity, but to paramountcy. They strip away the comforting illusions of benign leadership and expose the raw, often unforgiving machinery of power. To ignore them is to invite the fate of the idealist, to be crushed by a reality you refuse to acknowledge. To embrace them is to wield the instruments of enduring command, securing your position against the shifting sands of human nature and circumstance. Having grasped the foundational rules of external engagement, we now pivot to the internal crucible and the delicate architecture of public perception. The path to sustained dominion is not merely paved with external maneuvers, but forged in the unforgiving furnace of the leader's own psyche and meticulously sculpted through the art of appearances. This is the domain where the 21 rules of power transcend mere tactics, becoming a profound meditation on the human condition itself. The initial and most formidable conquest for any aspiring prince is an internal warfare. Before one can command armies, corporations, or even a compelling personal narrative, one must first subdue the tumultuous landscape of one's own mind. The inherent human tendency towards sentimentality, hesitation, and adherence to conventional morality becomes an Achilles heel in the pursuit of genuine influence. Machiavelli understood that the burdens of leadership necessitate decisions that are often stark, unpopular, and utterly devoid of comfort. The first victory, therefore, is over one's own innate compunctions, the lingering whispers of guilt, the fear of censure, the temptation to appease. This is not an invitation to depravity, but a demand for absolute objectivity. The effective leader must cultivate a chilling detachment, severing emotional bonds to outcomes and individuals when the preservation or advancement of their state demands it. To achieve this, the modern prince must learn to distance themselves from the common man's moral framework. They must comprehend that while individual ethics may guide personal conduct, the strategic imperative of leadership often operates on an entirely different plane. What appears good in a private sphere can be ruinous in the public forum of power. The objective is not personal vindication, but the unwavering pursuit of the greater good, that is, the security, stability, and enduring prosperity of one's dominion. This demands an unblinking gaze at reality, unclouded by wishful thinking or moral pretense. The leader must ask not, what is the kindest action, but what is the most effective action to safeguard and strengthen my position? This internal discipline, this mastering of one's own moral compass to point always towards strategic efficacy, is what empowers the prince to execute the 21 rules without faltering, transforming their aspirations into an unyielding, undeniable force. Once the internal battles are won, the external theater beckons. Here, the manipulation of public perception becomes an indispensable tool. Machiavelli famously explored the dichotomy: is it better to be loved or to be feared? His conclusion remains unequivocally pragmatic. It is much safer to be feared than loved, if one of the two has to be wanting. This assertion, often misconstrued, is not an endorsement of indiscriminate cruelty. On the contrary, Machiavelli cautions vehemently against being hated. Hatred breeds conspiracy, rebellion, and ultimately usurpation. Fear, however, when judiciously cultivated, breeds obedience and deterring opposition. It is a stable, potent emotion, far more reliable than the ephemeral bonds of affection, which, being based on gratitude, are easily broken by the fickle nature of men when their own advantage is at stake. The objective, then, is to instill a profound respect, verging on awe, for one's capabilities and the inevitable consequences of defiance. This is achieved through a consistent demonstration of unwavering resolve, the swift and equitable application of justice, which, as we discussed, may include well-used cruelties, and an unshakable commitment to maintaining order. The prince ensures their actions are perceived as decisive, necessary, and ultimately beneficial for the collective stability, even when they are individually harsh. The populace must understand that challenging the established authority carries significant, undesirable repercussions. When individuals are driven by self-interest, the threat of punishment proves a far more potent motivator than the elusive promise of reciprocal affection. The skillful leader thus crafts an image of formidable competence, an indispensable anchor in turbulent times, making opposition not just unwise, but seemingly unthinkable. This calculated projection of power ensures that the populace, though perhaps not passionately adoring, is reliably compliant, acknowledging the leader's preeminence as an unavoidable, even necessary fact of their existence. This leads us to the meticulous process of building the facade. Men in general, Machiavelli observed, judge more by the eyes than by the hands, for everyone can see, but few can feel. This profound insight underscores the paramount importance of reputation. The modern prince, applying the 21 rules, understands that every public act, every utterance, every visual cue is part of a grand, deliberate performance. The goal is to cultivate an image of desired virtues, regardless of the private means necessary to achieve and maintain power. One must appear merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright. These are not necessarily reflections of inner character, but strategic garments worn to manage public opinion, to diffuse potential dissent, and to bolster legitimacy. The leader must be a master impresario of their own narrative, ensuring that the public perceives them through a carefully constructed lens. If an act of severity is required, it must be framed as an unavoidable necessity for the common good, not as a personal vendetta. If flexibility is shown, it is presented as wisdom, not weakness. This consistent cultivation of a desired public persona is an ongoing project, a subtle yet powerful manipulation of collective consciousness. The reputation thus forged becomes both an impenetrable armor, deflecting criticism and undermining rivals, and a potent weapon, inspiring loyalty and obedience without the constant need for overt displays of force. It controls the judgment of the people, shaping their understanding of who you are and what you stand for, thereby securing the emotional and psychological terrain necessary for unwavering dominion. The prince understands that what one seems to be can often be more impactful, more persuasive, and ultimately more powerful than what one is. This calculated theatricality, this unwavering dedication to the facade, is an advanced application of the 21 rules, transforming the very air of public opinion into a formidable ally in the tireless pursuit of control. You have journeyed through the bleak landscape of human nature, unmasking the fallacies of idealism and understanding the cold, precise instruments of influence. You have seen how Machiavelli's 21 rules of power are not merely theories, but a battle map for the ambitious. Now, before we unveil how to solidify your legacy, how to transform these rules into an unyielding perpetual dominion. Ensure your commitment. Subscribe, for this ultimate wisdom is reserved for those audacious enough to seize it and weave it into the very fabric of their existence. This final stage is where the accumulated insights coalesce into decisive action, shaping the future according to your calculated design. The preceding discussions have laid the intellectual groundwork. Here we address the critical juncture, execution and timing, the moment of the decisive stroke. According to Machiavelli, this is the zenith of virtù, the leader's paramount skill in seizing a fleeting window of opportunity carved by fortuna. This is not a random act, but a meticulously planned culmination of strategic foresight, a fundamental restructuring of power. It might manifest as the swift elimination of entrenched rivals, the imposition of audacious new frameworks, or the decisive redirection of an entire enterprise. This critical juncture demands not just boldness, but profound clarity, understanding precisely when to act and how to ensure maximum impact with minimal prolonged detriment. For injuries ought to be done all at once, so that being tasted less they offend less, but benefits ought to be given little by little, so that they may be more thoroughly enjoyed. This immutable law of human psychology is central to the masterstroke. When difficult, even painful decisions are unavoidable, whether it is a corporate restructuring, a political purge, or a significant market pivot, they must be executed with surgical precision and finality. Prolonging the agony, allowing dissent to fester, or implementing changes incrementally only fuels resentment and undermines authority. The impact of a necessary injury is mitigated by its swiftness and singularity. Imagine a CEO announcing a sweeping one-time overhaul of an ailing division, taking the necessary painful steps to right the course, rather than bleeding the organization dry with a series of prolonged, uncertain adjustments. The initial shock may be intense, but the certainty of its completion allows for swifter recovery and acceptance. Conversely, any positive developments, any benefits, such as new opportunities, increased freedoms, or improved conditions, should be introduced gradually, allowing the populace to savor each increment, thereby fostering a sustained sense of gratitude and loyalty. This strategic choreography of pain and pleasure is a refined application of the 21 rules, transforming an act of force into a lesson in inevitability, paving the way for the new order. The decisive stroke, when applied with this Machiavellian understanding, is not just a triumph, it is a declaration. Yet a singular triumph, no matter how spectacular, is ephemeral without consolidation and the new order. The true genius of the modern prince lies not merely in winning the battle, but in establishing a peace that solidifies their dominion. The victory itself is merely the prelude. The real work begins the moment the dust settles. The leader does not rest on their laurels. They immediately commence the meticulous process of laying the unshakable foundations of their enduring power. This involves creating new institutions, forging unassailable alliances, implementing legal frameworks, and embedding cultural norms that perpetuate their influence and protect their position against future challenges. The objective is not simply to vanquish, it is to construct an impregnable state, an unassailable position, an enduring legacy, a robust structure of power that can withstand the corrosive forces of time, ambition, and fluctuating fortuna. This phase demands a relentless focus on stability and permanence. It involves identifying and neutralizing potential future threats, not with overt aggression, but through strategic preemption and absorption. Loyalists are rewarded and integrated into the new structure, creating a vested interest in the leader's continued supremacy. Dissidents, if not eliminated, are marginalized or co-opted, their influence diluted. Education and propaganda, in the broadest sense of shaping public discourse, are employed to reinforce the legitimacy of the new order, painting the leader as the essential architect of the prevailing stability. Think of a nation's founder, after a revolutionary victory, immediately drafting a constitution, establishing a new government, and creating a unified national identity. These are all acts of consolidation designed to ensure the perpetuation of the state they have brought into being. Similarly, a technology titan, after disrupting an industry, will swiftly establish new standards, acquire complementary companies, and dominate key patents, thereby entrenching their control and making it virtually impossible for new entrants to challenge their supremacy. This tireless commitment to building and fortifying the architecture of power is the ultimate expression of Machiavelli's vision, not merely to gain power, but to ensure that the throne, once seized, endures for generations, a testament to the unyielding will and strategic brilliance of its occupant. In conclusion, the wisdom of Niccolo Machiavelli, distilled into these 21 rules of power, transcends the petty squabbles of good and evil. It is a profound treatise on efficacy. The supreme leader is not defined by their benevolence or malevolence, but by their unshakable capacity to achieve and maintain their objectives in a world inherently indifferent to moral niceties. True power is the chilling ability to perceive the world not as it should be, but as it is, a landscape of ambition, self-interest, and relentless competition. It is the courage to act decisively upon that vision, untainted by sentimentality or conventional virtue, leveraging every tool at your disposal, both feared and respected, to guarantee order and stability amidst an otherwise chaotic existence. This is not about becoming a tyrant, but about becoming an architect of destiny, a sculptor of reality. It is about understanding that the ultimate aim is to construct a throne, a position of such undeniable influence and lasting strength, that it not only withstands the tests of time, but defines the very era it dominates. This is Machiavelli's modern playbook, a guide not just to navigate but to dominate today's world.